Greetings and welcome to another exciting episode of the Why I Love Disney podcast. This is Dustin back with you for episode, what are we on now, Easton? This is 75, 78, 79?
76, I think.
76. All right, well, I was all around it, but I'm here with my friends, as always, David and Easton. How are you fellas?
Couldn't be better.
Awesome. We're rolling into the summer. We're right before school lets out. I hear historically this is a great time to go to the parks because, you know, summer vacation season hasn't started yet. People are still in school, and there's this little lull between spring break and summer, right? Is that kind of accurate, David, from what you know?
I've heard that a lot lately. I did not think that historically, but I think now with graduations and weddings and things like that happening, a lot of things like that in May, maybe people can get away from home less, and so I have heard that several times lately. I definitely remember when it was like a fall lull, where you could, and I don't ever see the fall break, getting in there between the fall crowds anymore. That always seems crowded.
Well, I want to talk more about fall lulls here in a second, but I do also want to mention this is the time of year when Disney and Universal are both doing these things called like graduate bashes, which I remember it's one of the best things about living in Florida growing up is high school seniors from Georgia and Florida, they can get a reduced price ticket to get into the parks after hours until usually we used to go, the park didn't close till like 5 a.m. or something like that. It was like an all-night lock-in at the Magic Kingdom or Universal Studios. And now I think it's over at 2 a.m. or something like that. But still, just one of my best memories. Another thing you can do, you have your prom and you have all this stuff, and then you have grad night at Disney World where you get in a bus with all your high school senior friends and you go to the Magic Kingdom overnight. There's hardly any lines to the rides. They used to bring in A-level artists to do concerts all around the park. Wow. And I remember Boys to Men was there the night we were there. They were a big deal back when I graduated high school, And then there was in Tomorrowland they had a country concert. I remember, if you remember, David Lee Murphy and I think Travis Tritt was there. And this is the height of the '90s country. Like, this was a big time thing. And I'd love to know if there's any listeners out there that have friends or people that are still a part of this, if it's still that big of a blowout or if they've backed it off a little bit or how that works. But I know they still have it. And I tell my kids all the time, if we lived in Florida, when you're a senior, you could go and I tell kids here that all the time too. It's kind of one of those humble brags that, when I grew up, our prom was at Busch Gardens and we had grad night and went to the Magic Kingdom and y'all are trying to figure, y'all are going to cow pasture and having a bonfire. Not quite the same. You know what I'm saying?
Wow. I'm kind of got stuck in that story where Travis Tritt was in Tomorrowland.
Isn't that interesting? You put the Cowboys in Tomorrowland.
It does seem like Frontierland would have been a better, put him up on the Liberty Bell and let him go around and sing. But
100%
for the must have been the biggest stage. So
it may be so. Well, no, Boys to Men was at the castle. So the big hip hop artists were kind of at the castle, and then there was a stage. Is there an actual stage though over there? I know Tomorrowland has that pavilion with the concert stage, or they used to.
Well, there used to be. I definitely remember stages in Tomorrowland that aren't there anymore, and I've been meaning to go back and look at that because when I was in college, I was in a guys acapella group like every college has.
Wait, what was the name of it? What was the name of it?
That's for another
No,
time.
No! You got to tell us. What's the name of your acapella band?
No, I'm not. But anyway, we used to sing. We would go on our spring breaks. We would sing in Disney World, and we sang in Tomorrowland. And you would get into the stage from underground. You would be down below, and you'd come up, and then they would open the curtain, and you would be on stage. But that stage isn't there anymore.
Yeah, so. I think back in the day they used to host. Of course, there was the Christian music festival, the Night of Joy. There was also they used to do a thing that I've been to as well called Blast from the Past. Do you remember this? Where it was like an oldies music festival. And I remember
those were on the castle stage. Night of Joy was
stage. No, I remember distinctly. They were spread out around. There was different stages. The headliners were on the castle stage, but they had side stages.
Okay.
I remember when I was a kid. I don't even know why, but there was a band called Sha Na Na. Do you remember them, David?
Yeah, I do. That's really from my childhood. They were on television.
They had a TV show.
They were in
Yeah.
the movie Grease, and it gave them a TV show.
So when I was really little, I used to love the TV show Sha Na Na. Like, it was on repeats or whatnot. And the Bowser thing, I used to do that. My parents thought that was cute, so they used that as an excuse to bring me to go see Sha Na Na. And I remember I couldn't have been more than 5 years old. I saw Sha Na Na at that stage in Tomorrowland as well.
Wow.
So,
Well,
anyhow,
maybe did I share a stage with Sha Na Na at
you
some
probably
point?
did. And David Lee Murphy and Travis Tritt.
How about that?
So
There's a stage there now, but they do because they have character meet and greets up there, but it's not a very big stage. But there's at a Mickey's Not So Scary, there's going to be a character like Stitch or Buzz Lightyear out there or something like that.
But this is kind of season for what we talked about grad night and things going on. Actually, our old co-host Ramin is actually down right now with his family and not at Disney once again. He's at Universal Studios. I think there's a pattern here. And him and his family. I think his mother, I believe, is a big Harry Potter fan and had never been to Wizarding World, so they're all there together this week. Hopefully we can get him back and get a report from him as well. I'm trying to get him to text me links of lines and pictures from Velocicoaster. So hopefully we can talk to him about that soon.
I told him to take lots of notes because I was going to ask what the ride times were and what he ate, and that he needs to come on and talk to us and tell us about his trip.
What was funny is he called me a couple weeks ago when they were planning it. This is kind of a last minute sort of thing, and he said, "Hey, you got any tips?" And I proceed to yap for about a solid 40 minutes without stopping. And I did, you know how you tell when you're just really excited about something, what makes you light up? I use this thing about this little talk I give in some of the circles that I'm in about like what is connection, what is worship, and it's the thing that makes you light up that you could just talk about and talk about and talk about and never get tired. And that's for me, I guess it's theme parks, because me and Ramin were talking about single rider lines and the restaurants and little tips for Harry Potter World, and there's things we talk about here on Why I Love Disney. So I thought it's in my this podcast is in my bones, I guess I'm trying to say.
That's awesome. Well, I hope we can have him on here, and I want to hear some more of the things he has to say about his trip.
Absolutely. I know. I love that. It's one of my favorite things is like when somebody's gone to a park, I'll even find people I barely know, like on my kids' soccer team, and they just got back from a Disney trip, and I find myself like cornering them, like, "Hey, Dad, tell me, what'd you ride? What'd you like?" And just kind of like, and they're like, "Who is this guy? And why does he want to know all about our trip?" But that's kind of what we do. Usually I end up explaining, well, I have this podcast, and it's sort of, part of what, so I don't look completely weird.
And it's always kind of crazy, and you're talking to somebody, and you go, "Well, did you do Rise of Resistance?" "No, we just decided that we weren't really, that one wasn't really," like, you're like, "Oh."
I will say this, David. So there are two people that I know that I'm relatively close that have recently taken Disney trips. And one of them, a young lady, and she went with her sister and her mother, and she came back too. And I expect, 3 girls on a trip, what are they going to like to ride? But I'm asking, she said, Rise of Resistance. Maybe it's the second best ride I've ever ridden. The best ride is Cosmic Rewind. And they were just raving about the two and just saying like jaw drops. You can't. So everything you've said, David, is all confirmed. And those 2 rides are amazing.
Well, that's really good.
So,
I heard a report, a well-known Disney vlogger, the Disney Food Blog, talked about a new ride at Tokyo Disney being her favorite new ride of all time. Like, she's the best. So I haven't watched anything yet. I know the new lands are Tangled and Peter Pan and Frozen. So I don't know which one she has crowned the greatest ride ever. But there's always new things that jump in people's lists that we get to check out. Well, I've still got to get to Universal to ride Hagrid.
And Velocicoaster.
And Velocicoaster, which I have a feeling are going to be my favorite. So what?
So what you're saying is the 3 of us need to take a trip to Disneyland Tokyo, is what you're saying, right?
Oh yeah.
If any listener would like to sponsor that trip, we will gladly mention your company or your name all throughout. We'll figure out a reasonable price for the whole thing.
I brought that up at a recent. We had our whole family together for my son's graduation last week, and we were talking about what we would like to do next. And if we only had a few days, what would we do? And if we had longer, what would we do? And we got to Disneyland Paris last year as a group. So I've said, well, my next big milestone, I'm kind of voting for Tokyo, but we've got some in our group that are a little more like, oh, that's so far. And so I said, well, maybe it'll have to be just a guys group. And then my daughter-in-law went, wait a minute, I want to be in that group. So it's going to be a hard one to figure. It's going to be a hard one to figure out. Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, that's really awesome. I do love that there are, and I honestly forget because I'm just a Florida. I grew up in Florida. I only really think of Florida until you remind me, hey, there are other, Disneyland was the original, and there are other parks all over the world. I'm like, oh yeah, I would like to visit those sometime as well. But it is interesting because when you do the research and you kind of look into them, man, they also have different flavors and different takes and different things to experience. And so I totally get that. And I was fascinated to hear about your experience in Paris last summer.
Right, and you have to be careful because John David and I went to Disneyland in the fall, like his college graduation kind of thing he wanted to do, and Haunted Mansion was closed down because they were converting it into the Nightmare Before Christmas. The Liberty Bell was down, Splash just for refurb. Space Mountain was closed.
Good grief!
And Splash Mountain was down for refurb.
Yeah.
So Liberty Bell.
Bad luck.
That's not but three big things were so you have to really watch because you can plan a whole trip like Disneyland and think, oh, here we go, and then it's like you can't get it in Haunted Mansion. You can't. Space Mountain we can ride other places. You don't, but it's different. But you have to really watch because when you start bouncing around to other parks, you've got to know, like, hey, if I go all the way to Paris, is something major that only Paris has going to be closed? And
they're not telling you when you book the trip, hey, just heads up, this stuff, this isn't closed. They're not letting you know.
You have to look for it. You really do have to look for it. You have to go on their websites and really go. They all have refurbishment schedules, but you really have to go, check it out. Make sure that when you go, you're going to be. I think when we went to Florida and the last time was a group too, there was something closed. Well, Splash was closing, but I think something else was closed too. You just have to watch that. Things were closing and reopening, and at the last second, I think something that's usually big on our family list opened back up. But yeah, you got to watch it.
Absolutely. Well, we have a little bit of news we could talk about, and again, it's not huge news, but there is some interesting stuff. One is they said the hard opening date for Tiana's Bayou Adventure is the end of June, and so if you're going before the end of June, I'm sorry about your luck, but we do know I think it's June 28th. I had it in front of me. I lost. Is that correct? June 28th.
June 28th. Yep.
And it's very interesting. Their what do you call it? Their press junket. They're kind of like that they're getting all the stars from Tiana back out to promote this new ride and this opening. Maybe not exactly, but it's going. I'd say there's some mixed results about this. So I know you guys were telling me before that about some things you've seen on TV recently. I know American Idol just had a Disney crossover night. Was it last night or the night before? And
it was last night from the night we're recording. Yeah, last night. The actress that plays Mama Odie was on American Idol, and she sang "Dig a Little Deeper," and they had Lewis out there in the Lewis costume, and a big crowd of singers, and so it was a good performance. It was a good performance. She's also been Disney's used her a lot lately to do some promo for the attraction, and that she's coming to see the Mama Odie animatronic, so that's been out there. She's also been on some podcasts where she kind of sharing her political views, and so that's been interesting too. She's been quite on the I don't know, what do you call it, a roller coaster of media.
Yeah, it's interesting because we talked about the animatronics in Tiana that were when she saw it, and it is. I will say that animatronic is something else. Like it is pretty incredible. It is
amazing.
It is a lot of. I have heard several people talking about the little leaks coming out, and that I get the feeling that the vibe of the attraction. We've kind of talked about this with the villains thing. There's not really a scary villain anymore, and of course, in this story, the villain of Princess and the Frog is not in this story. So I get the impression that this is not, in Splash Mountain, they kind of build up tension like it's scary. Like, oh no, we're going down. And I have a feeling in this ride, they're converting the scare factor to just laughter. It's just a fun ride. I don't get the impression that it's scary. So like they're changing the mood, and they did that with, I think they did that with Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout, where they changed Tower of Terror theming out in California to Guardians. You hear more laughter instead of screams. It's the same ride, but you hear it. It's like the atmosphere changes the mood of the attraction to me. So I kind of anticipating that just a little bit of different rite of passage.
Yeah, there's always that build up before the big log flume drop of some sort of catastrophe awaiting, kind of just to build up the dread.
Yeah, you've got the whole "please don't throw me, please don't." And,
although if you know the story, you know how it ends, right? Don't throw me in that briar patch, whatever you do, and then they threw him in the briar, and you're going to be okay, right?
Right.
But there's also the one, I don't know if you've ever done, I think it's Jungle Adventure. The one at the boat ride at Universal Studios or Islands of Adventure in Jurassic Park World, where you're actually, you end up in the mouth of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and you're like, oh no, and then you just plunge to. So it's all about like building tension and making you scared. I wonder if they flip the opposite. It's like, unicorns and clouds and hey, let's just head back down. Let's go in a quick, fast way. So every kid's like, yeah, that sounds funny. You, whoosh, go down, whee,
Yeah.
I don't know. It'd be an interesting approach. Definitely something new and different, but we'll see.
Well, if the attraction had been made 30 years ago, it would have been Dr. Facilier at the top of that lift saying, "I'm going to throw you to the other side." I mean, it would have been something terrifying. And than it is now.
Yeah, and if it had been like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, if it had been a log flume, you end up, you're up there, and then you end up in hell. You could actually like descend, like throw them down into hell, and you float around at the end, in Hades, in the underworld.
And you have to get back out. That's the challenge of the ride, is getting back out now.
Right.
Anyhow. Yeah, I have a feeling that it's going to be a different theme, but it'll be good.
It's amazing.
I'm trusting that it's going to be good. I'm not sure what I think. I'm just trying to stay in the middle, because I hear a lot of people complain, and I hear a lot of people praising it. So we'll just have to stay in the middle until it comes out.
We'll find out. And then, until there's a reason not to be, we'll be optimistic. I will anyway, again, the animatronic looked amazing. We know the ride track, unless they've drastically changed it, is, it's been there forever. It's it's a long ride. You usually stand in line for a while, but it's usually worth the wait because there's so much there, and you're on it for a while. So there's a lot of opportunities for them to tell a story. So I'm curious to see what story they tell, and they still have a few months to get things worked out, as well, and maybe focus test group some audiences, or maybe not. I don't know if they do that anymore, but might be a good idea. Speaking of the fact of it opening is I was reading a Yahoo Finance article, and we just talked about the stock price last episode, and it cites this as one of the 3 reasons why the stock might be a good buy right now. That being because they have a new major attraction opening up over the summer that might drive some theme park attendance and keep it strong over the next little bit. And they coupled that with 2 other things that I thought was interesting is, the Planet of the Apes movie, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, just released this past weekend.
Right.
And I think generated about $56 million, which was, I think, beat their expectations. Internationally, 129. And actually was, I think, pretty strongly well received by analysts and kind of critics and fans alike. So, that's a beginning of the summer movie that seems to be doing well. And then they talk about, you got Inside Out 2 is next in a few weeks, and then Deadpool in July, and then the new Alien movie in August. That between those 4 movies, if this is any indication, maybe Disney is back to getting some hits at the box office again, and that seemed to be a cause for optimism in the stock price.
Well, we just talked about that. We just talked about that movie, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. We saw a trailer again for it last night, and we were like, man, because it released last weekend. Did you say?
Yeah, this past weekend. It released, I think, Friday before we recorded this episode.
Oh, gotcha.
I did notice. I had noticed that I had not heard a lot of negative criticism this week. So I was actually noticing that, going, wait a minute, I haven't really heard anything. So what does that mean? I did see a couple of negative. I mean, there's always one or two that are going to say, like, well, it's not as good as you think it is. But yeah, I told Easton and I were talking about it last night. I was like, I don't really know this franchise well,
Yeah.
but if it's a standalone, I would go. But if I've got to go back, and I think it's one of those things, you start wondering, like, do I have to know every one of these movies to go see this, or does it stand alone? But
Sure.
so
Well, then the other bit of news, and there's always a little bit, but there were some protesters that were blocking the entrance and exit of Disney World the other day, to the chagrin of a lot of park goers, and ended up, of course, being a big mess. Now, this is an editorial quote, editorial thing I'm about to say, but they were all arrested within 11 minutes. So hats off to the Florida State Patrol who got in there quickly and said, "Hey, we are not going to protest all you want, but we're not going to block the entrance to the happiest place on earth. We're not doing that." It was Disney World, excuse me. It was in Florida, and very probably a good distinction. I don't know what would have happened in Disneyland, but in Florida, within 11 minutes, there were people being carted off and arrested for.
Well, just not to correct you, but somebody will that Disney World is the most magical place on earth.
Okay.
So Disneyland is the happiest. That there are some people that are very. I think they're both pretty happy. So
Well, I don't think protesters add to the magic.
It's true.
So,
No.
especially the group, I believe, is a group called Queers for Palestine, and that in and of itself is sort of an oxymoron, and you can research that on your own. But I do again, it's America. Say what you want to say, but when you start blocking major interstates and roads and interfering in the lives of regular people who just want to go on vacation. I was happy to see that was squashed quickly, and hopefully it's not an ongoing issue that Disney has to deal with. They've had enough political headaches that recently to have to navigate some of these waters as well.
Not too long ago, I listened to some podcasts about in the 60s, in 1968, a group called they were called the Youth International Party, Yippies, took over Disneyland. Like, they came in and, like, with tickets, but just in huge numbers, and were breaking the dress code and all and then the whole podcast was how, and Dick Nunes, who is like he is a Disney legend as a parks operator, like what they had to do to get because they stopped the park. I mean, they basically shut down the movement of the park that day because there are all these normal, families that aren't there to protest, and then they've got this stuff going on. And so it really interesting even to go back into the 60s and see it did happen. Like, people could shut the whole park down. Can you imagine what it would be like now? Of course, that was the first time that anything like that had happened. Like, it took 10 plus years before it really got to that point. But
yeah, and really, when, in a situation like that, and you run into this with different groups who show up on a certain day, and they're unofficial days, if you will, for groups of people who descend on the park, right? And I don't know if you're Disney, what you can do about that. If people buy a ticket for a certain day, they show up and they're wearing whatever slogan T-shirts or flying flags or whatever. What do you do about that? And I know there are dress codes and things like that, right. But in large numbers, you're walking a delicate balance of allowing people to free expression and then the line of like, well, when is this a problem for everyone else here? And the instance you're describing, it sounds like there were lots of rule violations and lots of it was a very, very hostile takeover, not just a pleasant hey, we're just here enjoying Disney World as a group kind of thing.
Well, I think when when you go in and you have a group that goes in like that and like in mass go to somewhere like Tom Sawyer Island, or in mass, I'm just random. I mean, I know that was. I'm pretty sure that was one, or just the whole. If they're just laying out on the grounds everywhere, it's obvious. So. I think even though I'm sure they were saying it was more peaceful protests. They're in enough numbers that, but they bring in the police and they do like push them out. I mean I'll have to go back and listen to that and fill you in better. But it was the first time I'd heard that whole story. But there are articles about it, and it made the news. And
well, that'd be an interesting topic too. Is political protest in the history of Disney parks. There's probably enough between the Vietnam War since Disneyland opened till now. There's probably quite a few examples. I'd love to know policies, like how they deal with these things, and generally.
I pictured Debbie Downer from Saturday Night Live. Let's talk about let's talk about
protesters. Why I love Disney. Today, folks, we are going to talk about protesters at Disney and how Disney arrest all of them. What a great topic. I get you. But I would find it fascinating to know what they do with it.
I would find it fascinating too. I really would. No, I would. Any park's history, I always find fascinating when you go back and go, man, some of these issues have still been going on for 40, 50 years,
Sure. We talked about when the lulls are in the traffic at the park, and you said, well, typically it's fall, right? And I recently heard it might be fall specifically now that the fall break is a thing, and now they have the not so scary Halloween festival that attracts a lot of people. But after Halloween through Thanksgiving, I had heard somebody had told me that that's a great time to go to the park because it's after the busy Halloween part, but it's before the holiday season start. So there's momentum. It's not a done deal yet, but there's momentum for my family to go down in early November to visit the parks for the first time in probably about a decade. I mean, I've been to Universal a couple times since, but there's momentum to go there. And I had a couple of questions. One, what should I consider in going for that weekend in particular? And there are things I'm leaving out or not thinking about. We'll only have 3, maybe 4 days that we could do the park because there's a window of time my kids are out of school, and just kind of get your opinions on that first. And then I have one other question I want to ask you, but I'll let you guys comment on that first.
Okay. My first thing is I was going to tell you, and I'm not to just be cautious about, is that remember that even though that's November, if you go President's Weekend, is that the holiday? No, election.
It's election. It's the election.
Sorry, election. Yeah. I know what I'm thinking. If you go that day, the election day, they're gonna be people there the same way because they got kids out of school.
Okay.
So there will be a rise. Because they're kids. Anytime kids are out of school, the reason typically November to Thanksgiving is a little bit of a lull is because most kids don't have any breaks. Families don't have a break. So there's no kids out of school for anything. So that's the one reason between that period that you can still find sometimes some. So if the kids could miss a day of school, like the Wednesday, and you could grab an extra day, that would be one thing I would say talk to mom about and see if the kids talk to the teacher, see if they can miss one extra day. A lot of times when they have a couple of days off, that first day is a reorientation anyway. So maybe you could work it out with their teachers to get their work and be ahead. But because I do think that on that Saturday and Sunday, Monday, you're still going to see a rise because it is a break for people. But other than that, I think just to sit down and go, is there anything we can take off the table? Like we decide not to do Animal Kingdom, or we say we're going to go into Epcot, but our goal is going to be just to do Cosmic Rewind, and we're going to hit the other, try to figure out what the guys want to do the most, and target that, whether you do the park hopper or you just eliminate a park altogether so you can do more with what you have. It's really hard to bounce through all those parks and try to grab an attraction here or there if you've not been in a long time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And there's a lot of things that haven't not been in a decade. A lot of things we've never done that would be high on the priority list, right?
And maybe there'll be so many people excited about this election that people will be in line and to vote while you're at Disney World.
Honestly, it's one of the reasons I'm going, because I'm so unexcited about the election. But
they will
no,
not
I'll
have,
early vote. I'll early vote. Now you can vote for like a week. You know what I'm saying? So,
right. I think a lot of people will early vote and take advantage of that break. But I still, if you,
yeah, I was thinking of more a way to distract myself from the realities we're facing as a nation.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, if you've got a break, I mean, that's the problem. That's the challenge. If you've got a break, you've got to take it and go, even if you're like it's going to be crowded, because it's really going to always be crowded. I still kind of believe that it's always crowded now, because when they know they just kind of can manipulate the crowd, because they know exactly how many people are there. They can shut things down. They can manipulate which restaurants are open based on the size of the crowd. So it keeps everything kind of at a. That's what I think. It feels like no matter when you go, you're standing in line. So there you go.
That makes sense. Easton, you got any thoughts on that? You got any advice for me?
Well, kind of what I was thinking is what he's already said is just like because if you hadn't been in a decade, there is like a handful of things that they've added on that you guys have never done. So getting a good priority list of like, these are the things that we absolutely want to make sure we get into the trip, and kind of planning around that. Because you're there, would you be there Friday through Sunday? Would you have 3 days?
We would actually come home. We would leave. We would be there on Friday, and we would be done on. We would travel home on Tuesday.
Okay. So would you would have?
So we'd have Monday in the park as well.
Is that including Friday in the park, or is it just Saturday, Sunday, Monday?
We haven't decided, but for right now, it would look like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday in the parks.
Yeah, but getting like a good priority.
Well,
list.
you could do one day in every park, and then don't hop, and just say we can't do it all. We're gonna do the things that are our priority and go for it. And your way around. That's half of it. I mean, that around Magic Kingdom, Epcot, those things. Those areas, so you know how to get right to things, and you can be prepared now, so that you're not just wandering in going, where is Expedition Everest? I mean, you can know before you go, and you can pull out your phone and it'll map it for you. I mean,
and doing a podcast like this, I know what my priority list is. I absolutely know. But I have one more question for you guys about this. So when I go, even a 4-day like park hopper pass, I mean, we're talking, I got a family of 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy expensive. At what point is it better just to get an annual pass and make another trip, plan it like 2 more trips? Does that make sense?
Can you get the annual pass right now?
I don't know if you can or not. I don't know.
I didn't think you could. I thought you had to be, but I haven't looked into that lately, because
it's up on the website.
I mean, I considered it a lot when John David was living in Florida with college. I looked at, like, is it worth it for me? But you couldn't get them a lot at that time.
Yeah,
right.
They weren't available. They weren't available if you were out of state.
It looks like I'm sitting right now in the checkout with a subtotal. So like, I feel like I couldn't get this far if I wasn't able to get them.
Okay.
But like, at what point? Like, how many times? Like, I mean, it cost me about double, right? For 4 days in the park hopper, right? If I double it, the price of that, I could get us all annual passes. Is that something to consider?
Well, you're fortunate that you have a lot of points that when you're going on this trip, you're using points.
That's true.
To get your hotel and things like that off site for a great value. And so, if you can do that again next time, then I could see that being worth it. I think you have to. It used to be you had to go twice. I mean, I had family members that had annual passes from North Carolina that went down there, and they would try to get down there 2 or 3 times a year, and then they had paid for it.
Yeah.
It was worth it. You just have to balance out what it would cost to go one time and then look at it and go. I mean, I do think one thing I really wish they would work on is a little bit of value, and I just saw a whole video that they have removed that value, the word value, from so many things. It used to be value resorts, and just like we had value menus at restaurants, but it's like they don't want you focused on that. They're focusing more on like premium crowds.
Yeah.
But we really need something for families of 5 and 6, because if you're not a family of 4, then the next thing up is so extravagant.
Right.
Something
there's 6 of us, so we have to. It's just it's great if you're a family person. It's not great if you have to take all these kids to Disney.
Right. If you were staying at the park, if that was your dream, you would have such a limited number of things you could do unless you split up.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. I'm thinking through it. We haven't pulled the trigger on it yet, but we're just considering some options right now. And I'd love your input. I'd like to talk about this more in a future episode. In fact, it also brings to mind, I worked at a conference this past week for the Kentucky Travel Association, Industry Association, and they had their big professional conference of travel agents and tourism boards and things like that, and had some incredible statistics on travel economics. There was a guy there from a national, an international corporation who only does travel economy work, right? And they're about to release their 2023 numbers, and there were some fascinating things that I'd love to share with you guys about that. But This is the cliffhanger. So people are gonna have to tune in for more to find out what the Kentucky Travel Industry Association conference said about travel, specifically premium travel versus budget travel, and how that works.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
So I appreciate your time as always, and for our listeners that stick in with us every week, we really appreciate you and we value you. You can find us or reach us at whyIloveDisney.com and through some social media channels as well. If you would, leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. And on behalf of my friends, Easton and David, I would like to say farewell to you. Have an awesome day.